is a video about the FLSUN Prusa i3 clone, style printer. Some people say they're not a clone because Prusa is open source, so it's not technically a clone, but everyone just refers to them as a clone, so that's probably what I'm going to be referring to them as from now on. I paid $120 for this printer from Amazon. This one was a refurbished unit, kinda, sorta. It was more like a store return. I don't really recommend buying the store returns, even though they're super cheap, because the power supply it included, which is actually over here, they include these really sketchy power supplies, no brand name on it anywhere, and some of the Amazon reviews say these don't really have enough wattage to power the printer. But anyways, the power supply this store return unit included never worked right, but that was fine because I was planning on replacing it anyways with this ATX supply I have here. So this one has, this sketchy one has 20 amps on the 12 volt rail, so that makes it a 240 watt power supply, and this is a 500 watt power supply, and of course it's an ATX supply, so not all of those watts are on the 12 volt rail, but I believe it has 38 watts on the 12 volt rail, and it's 80 plus certified, which God knows what certification these have, if any. Which 80 plus is just an efficiency certification, but generally, if it's efficient enough to get a 80 plus certification, then it's not completely sketch. I mean, this isn't a great power supply. I might not put this in a high-end computer, but for a low-end computer or for a 3D printer, it's more than enough. I believe I paid $20 for this on Newegg when it was on sale. I think its MSRP is around $40. It's not a bad price for what it is. Just get any 500 watt power supply if you plan on doing a mod like this. And this is my tool for prizing up 3D prints. It works. Didn't feel like buying an official one, so it's just an old kitchen knife. But for power, this was supposed to be an 8-pin GPU connector on this end, and it was supposed to be like an extender for that, but I ended up getting I paid 80 cents for it on AliExpress, and as things go when you pay 80 cents on AliExpress, you don't always get what you ordered, and in this case, this is actually 8-pin CPU, and it's an extender, and I cut it in half and commoned all the 12 volts, and ground together and put them into this connector here. Some people online say you should solder because these connectors aren't technically rated high enough. I don't really care. I'm not running this printer overnight, and frankly, it's probably fine. But if you're paranoid, then I suppose you could just solder these wires directly onto the bottom of this. As you can see, the cable management with these printers isn't great, but whatever, they're in the basement, no one's gonna really see them. I 3D printed a 3D benchy with this printer earlier, and it turned out really nicely. There's a little bit of Z-wobble, but that's really the only flaw with it. The lighting in here isn't great, so you can't see it all that well, but it handled the overhangs fine. All of the surface textures are decent. They're not perfect, but they're decent. Just a little bit of Z-wobble, which, for the $120 I paid for this printer, is actually quite good. As you can see, I don't have the limit switch here. For some reason, probably because I built it slightly wrong, but the instructions aren't great, so, yeah, that's something else I'll touch on later. The instructions are really not great at all. Probably because I built it wrong. The Y-axis, when it homes this way, and the limit switch is supposed to be here. So I just cut up this piece of acrylic and mounted the limit switch here. And again, because this is a store return, the limit switch was a little bit broken, but it seems to work okay anyways. It's missing its, like, little metal lever. As you can see, this one has its little metal lever. The Bowden tube these comes with is way too long, and filament kept jamming, so I cut it down to a more reasonable length. This one was also missing this fitting, which I actually stole from this one, which is my new one, that I paid $270 for. And this was a brand new unit, not a store return. And I'm gonna just buy a fitting to replace this. They're like $2 online. It's not bad at all. But I wanted to get into 3D printing, and for the price of these kits, they seem like decent first kits, if you know what you're doing enough. I also was able to mount a Raspberry Pi to here, just using one of these random acrylic things. I think they're meant to mount the sketchy power supply to the printer. Again, the instructions aren't great, so I'm really not quite sure what they're meant for, but if you just cut them up a little bit, that's what I used to mount this limit switch there, and that's what I'm using to mount the Pi. And these are just screws that were included with the printer that I'm just spare screws, I guess you could call them. This printer was missing a few screws. This one had some spare screws. I took them from this one. But there were some screws that this one didn't have spares of, so I just used random screws I had around the house, like here. This is totally not supposed to be sticking out like that. It's supposed to be more like that one, and be a grub screw and go inside. And here, this is also, you can't really see this. Here, this is supposed to be a grub screw, but again, just used a random screw I had lying around the house. Because I wanted this built. The heated bed on these seemed to work fine. This one's also missing an inductive sensor, which this one has for the bed. This is a heated aluminum bed. 200 by 200 build volume. Believe it's 220 in the Z-axis. Don't really care. Z-axis build volume is never going to go that high anyways. At least for what I'm printing. Even though it's a heated bed, I still am putting tape and glue on it, just in case, because I have had some layer adhesion problems, but I was probably setting the heat a little bit too low, but still. Glue's cheap, tape lasts a while before you need to replace it, and it's also pretty cheap. Cheaper than the plastic. I don't want to waste the plastic, so I'm just using, tape and glue. And I know this tape is, like, bubbly, it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, it's gonna make the bottom not perfect. But the bottoms are not that perfect anyways, as you can see here. It's not bad, it's just not perfect. This is a lac from IKEA. I'm gonna eventually put this one on a lac as well, and maybe stack the lacs or something. They're like $7, so you can cut them up and mess with them, because this table's supposed to go somewhere else, but it's kind of temporary. So these are lacs from IKEA. I mean, for $7, they're sturdy enough. So this is my new unit. And this one's not printing yet because it's missing its Bowden fitting. That's coming in from China. Who knows when. Bought it on AliExpress. Like I said, I paid $1 or $2 for it. Hopefully I get what I ordered, which with AliExpress is a little bit hit or miss. This one included everything it was supposed to, including an SD card reader, which this one didn't include. These are like 80 cents on AliExpress. Not that much extra added value, but nice to include. This one also included an SD card, which is actually over here. A nice Kingston card, which is a surprise. Not sure if that's a real Kingston or a clone. Don't really care all that much. It seems to work. This one included its inductive bed leveling sensor, which the manual didn't tell me where to put it, so I had to ask the seller to send me an updated manual because they included an out-of-date manual, which is interesting. The manual on these is really not very good. I would recommend having some basic working knowledge of how a 3D printer works before you buy one of these, because there's a lot of things where it's like the manual's not really going to explain it. The power cord these include to go with their sketchy power supplies is sketchier than the power supply itself, which is really saying something. If I can get it untangled here, this one's not plugged in right now because it's not working yet because it lacks its Bowden fitting, and I may actually get an ATX power supply for this one, we'll see. So this is the power cable they include. Notice this is the US power cable they include. If they're in the EU, they include one that looks decent, but I don't know EU power cable standards because I'm in the US. And frankly, do I even have that one still? Here we go. So this is the one they include if you're in the EU. It actually has ground. It's actually quite a bit thicker than the US ones if we look at the leads inside. They're still not especially thick, but like this one I would feel a lot more comfortable using, especially because it has ground and better insulation than the US one. But I'm in the US, so I wish they wouldn't include this in the box if they're shipping it to a US-based address and include a nicer US one. And likewise for the EU, they wouldn't include a US one, and they would include a nicer EU one, but what do you expect for this price point? I mean, it ships from China, so But yes, you'll probably notice that this is not at all up to any sort of standard, like the power supply. If you're not familiar with US power cords, there's supposed to be little holes here. I believe that's for electrocution safety as well as spark safety. You don't want it to spark when you're plugging it in, and the holes help with that. Also, this is way too thin for the amount of current this is going to be pulling. This is, I mean, the heated bed's an 150 watt heated bed, and this is thinner than, like, what else do I have that uses a power cord down here? Not much. This is kind of like my workshop, and most of my tools are put away. And I don't want to show you it because it's a complete mess right now, because I just finished building this second 3D printer, so, like, all my, there's just stuff all over the table. But I have a soldering iron, which uses a lot less power than this printer, and it's also shipped from China, and isn't a great soldering iron. But its cord is thicker than this one. And it's a cheapy soldering iron that probably uses, like, what? I think it's a 60 watt soldering iron. And this is an 150 watt heated bed. Not even to mention the hot ends or the steppers. And it has this thinner cord. Which, to give you an idea, this one also has a ground, so it's going to be thicker because of that. But this is the cord that comes with my thermal take power supply. And it's a lot thicker. A lot thicker. So, things I'm waiting to get in, mostly for this one, because this one I built first, so it has the Pi and the power supply, are, right now I just have this thing going to the 24 pin, but the 24 pin has a 5 volt standby rail, and if you couldn't see, I'm using an Apple phone charger thing for the, Pi. So I want to use the 5 volt standby rail of this to power the Pi, which means I'm getting in a 24 pin extender from AliExpress. So I'm just going to chop up. That was like a $2 extender or something. That might be a 20 to 24 pin. It's something like that. It gives me the pins I need on this, and I'll just cut these wires and solder them onto that extension, which this is a power thing switch that I made. This LED isn't working right now because it's powered off of Molex, and my cheapy Molex adapters that I bought from AliExpress broke. Or the one I'm using for here. I have like 10 of them, so I could replace it, but I'm probably going to power, this is powered off Molex with a resistor, the 5 volt Molex line with a, I think it's an 100 ohm resistor in there. I don't really remember, but I put some random resistor in with this LED. But I think I might just power it off the 3.3 volts of the 24 pin once I get that extender in, which is why I'm not bothering to replace the Molex adapter. And of course I should probably do some cable management here. Again, just finished building this one. This one I built a few days ago. So it's all still new and not completely set up yet, so this is prone to changing. But again, the prints these produce are pretty good for the price. This is sliced with Cura on a pretty default slicing profile. It's the Cura engine in a Repetier, or this also is running Octoprint, this Pi, and I have the Cura engine in that loaded up. So I can slice with Cura engine on that, and I'm using pretty much the exact settings I'm using in Repetier for this. I have some other example prints. This one, it ran out of filament partway through, and I don't really care because it still gets its job done. This is part of a filament holder that is here. This has an Apple logo on it because it's actually a MacBook stand, except I no longer have the Mac this goes with. So I converted it to a filament holder because this was a very long 3D print, and I didn't want to waste it. I printed this on a different printer that, it's a public 3D printer. It was like a library or whatever, a long time ago, back when I had this Mac. Well, not a long time ago, but probably about a year ago now. I no longer have any Macs, actually. I have a ThinkPad now, which is much better. I love my ThinkPad. But that's not really the topic of this video at all. And I ramble way too much, which is why I don't really make videos. And this was supposed to be quick, and it's 15 minutes long, and I've barely talked about print quality, and I haven't turned the printer on yet. So these fans are way too loud, and it sounds like the bearings are probably shot. and I'm going to get a step-down converter again, from AliExpress. I paid 40 cents for it, which, God knows if it will show up at all for that price. So I can run these off of a little less than 12 volts to not completely destroy their bearings. This one is actually intelligently controlled by this board, but these ones just are hot-wired to the power supply because that's what the manual told me to do, and that's what I did. But this is the connector for this, that's intelligently controlled by this board, kind of like I can set the fan percentage speed in the menu. Now this board integrates a RAMPS 1.4 and an Arduino Mega onto a single board. You're not getting a very good look at it because of all of the wires, but the stepper drivers are socketed, which is nice. It is a single board solution, which, I mean, probably isn't as good if it breaks, but it's fine for the price, and it seems like a decent single board solution, and it has fan cooling, which, again, lots of people on the internet appreciate, it seems. So this is a character-based LCD. It's a very simple one. It seems to be running a pretty stock version of Marlin. I did check, and it has safety features like min-temp enabled, which is good. Not all of these Chinese printers have that enabled. I mean, it's definitely not the safest printer in the world. It includes that power supply. But, I'm not running it overnight, and I check in on it pretty regularly when it's printing, so I'm not too worried. You can print from SD card, which, again, stock version of Marlin, of course you can. Which, like, this is a G-code file here that just uses normal G-code files, again, stock version of Marlin. Like, the software's not very exciting. If you've seen any version of Marlin before, this is pretty standard as far as it goes. For Marlin on a character-based LCD. This one, if you can tell, has a blue LCD. This one has a green. No clue what color LCD you'll get, don't really care that much, but just another sign of the quality that they're just using probably whatever LCD they can get cheapest on that particular day. So I could show you printing, or I could not, because that would probably bore you a lot. But I'll home it for you, I guess, because that is not going to take nearly as long. This screen is so hard to capture on video. But it's homing now. So, you can see what I mean about this homing in technically the wrong direction, because the limit switch is supposed to be there, but I put it there so it doesn't keep grinding. No clue why that happens. Probably built something wrong. Again, the directions aren't very good. Could have bothered to try to figure out why that was happening, but it was just a lot easier to put the limit switch over there. And then, of course, the prints finish over here because it auto-homes when it finishes, which is a little bit annoying, but I can always go to the screen, and I can move the y-axis back over to me, which is what I normally do after a print finishes. So, that's it homed. You don't get quite the 200 build volume in the y-axis they advertise, which is a little bit annoying. Again, it could be because I put this thing here. But other Amazon reviews have mentioned that. I find myself getting about 190 millimeters in the y-axis. I do get the full 200 in the X, though, and again, I get like 220 or something in the Z. Never have gone that high. This one's at 200 high right now, but you're supposed to get a little bit more, and you can see there's a little bit more right there. But I don't really know. This one was on earlier, and I was testing the motion system and whatever, and it seems to move fine, which is good because this one is new, so you would expect it to if this one's working. So yeah, if you know what you're doing and you can source the parts, then $120 for a Prusa style printer that prints as well as this one does is really a steal. But expect a few headaches with this one. This one you're not going to get nearly as many headaches, but it's still a kit, and it's still a Chinese kit. And there's still things like the awful manual that one of the things it tells me not to fix the screws. Which fix apparently means affix or tighten or whatever. But the English is just really bad in the manual, and the pictures are mediocre at best. Lots of them are very blurry, low resolution. The manual contradicts itself a few times, so you kind of have to have a basic knowledge of printers if you want to do this. The seller seemed really friendly, very good at customer service. Again, I contacted him about this inductive sensor and where in the world was I supposed to mount it, how was I supposed to mount it, because the manual was outdated and didn't really tell me anything about it. He also sent me a version of Marlin that has the features for that built in, which is good because I haven't flashed it on here yet. I'm obviously not using this printer yet. But I could probably get that set up when I want to. And that's really all I have to say. The SD cards obviously go here. You could probably figure that out on your own. So, yeah.